Grievance Gordy Show. Grievance Gordy Show. Grievance Gordy. Just say no, don't you know? That's right. See, every time I do that, then the clock starts on the schmangy. Huge news, guys. In case you don't know, I'm writing a novel. It's called Linoleum Blownapart. By the time this novel comes out, a couple of films, Stanley Kubrick's film about Napoleon will have come out. Ridley Scott's film about Napoleon will have come out. Okay. And so this is going to be satiating in everybody's mind. And so by the time my novel comes out, it's going to coincide with what? A television series. That's basically what I'm writing. And it's kind of like combining The Sopranos with Not Fade Away. Okay. And so just to give you a little taste on what is happening, that's what I'm doing. And I'm here in West Hollywood, and I'm really grateful to be here. We are going to use Mark Fisher as the template for this professor. Okay, so I got to give people a little bit of background about the story. There's a kid in a punk rock band in the 1980s, and he finds out that he has the same birthday as Napoleon. Now, how he finds this out is from a film called Bonaparte, Bon Ami, and how he and the audience who's watching this or reading it finds out about Bonaparte, Bon Ami, and about this birthday and everything like that is because of a filmmaker named Walter, who at the same age as, the kid in the punk rock band, but in, 1930, he saw Napoleon's 5-hour, or not Napoleon's, but Abel Ganz's 5-hour classic silent film just called Napoleon. And so 30 years later, 40 years later, it came out in 29. So in 1969, on Napoleon's 200th anniversary birthday, they release Bonaparte, Bon Ami. And one of the greatest things in Bonaparte, Bon Ami is that it's not about Napoleon. It's a Terry Gilliam style film where an inept idiot idolizes Napoleon. So everybody knows the story of Napoleon, for the most part, but we're going to see it through the eyes of this idiot, right? And he's not an innocent one. He's literally an idiot. Okay. And he's so dumb, but he becomes enamored with Napoleon, right? So Walter, who makes the film, is kind of making this film about himself, but what he's really telling the world, it's really bloody, and there's a lot of death, and there's a lot of destruction in the film, but it's a comedy. So what Walter, the filmmaker, is telling the world, he's really telling his own story, and he's dealing with the trauma of being involved with a fascist government in the 1930s. You see how simple it all is? Now he makes 7 films. Okay. And don't forget, you have The Life of the Punk Rockers. That's from 1987 to 1996. And then if the series gets picked up, we go from 1996 onward in with an African-American filmmaker and rap music, because we're going to go out of the grunge right into rap. Because what happened with Generation Z, Gen Z, and the millennials is that they grew up listening to both. Okay, when I was 16, I was listening to both. Okay, so it's very similar to my story. It's similar to any of these people who's into this kind of music. Okay, don't forget, I wrote all the songs. Okay, let's not forget that. Let's just not forget any of that. I wrote all the songs. I've been writing for a long time. All my writing is on Kindle. It's for sale. It's behind a paywall. Listen for the whistle. Can't really hear it. It was turned down in the mix, and I'm very angry about that. Okay, so this is the type of angry music that I was making in the 1980s. And I always talk about the mixing and the performance and the mixing, but only somebody without a tin ear can hear that hook. And they're like, wow, that's and I can also hear the orchestral movement around this melody. I could begin filling it in. And I don't even read music. Okay. This is how well versed I am. So I'm going to take all my songs. Okay. In case you want to need to know, I left Detroit in the 1990s, and somebody whispered in somebody else's ear, and it went all the way around. And when it came back, it said, "Let's set Gordon Ison up for murder." That's what it fucking said. Yeah, and you're going to answer for that. Make no mistake about it. So that's, sorry, I have to do this character work, okay? This is what I do. And all this intensity is going into my project, okay? It's just real and true, and that's my real life. That's what happened in my real life. And, in case you don't know, my drummer and my wife had fake Facebook accounts, and they were cranking the algo up, and it causes serious confusion. This confusion happened for over a decade, and it sent me to get a CAT scan. Okay. So when they answer for it, and they will, because the corporation, that's Facebook, that's bigger than the United States government and the United States itself, they're going to be going, what? Oh, we didn't know people were doing that. And I'm going to say, well, I know my wife and my drummer were. They're going to be like, well, that's on them. See, I've been to jail and I've been gang jumped. You understand? Maybe that's what they need to happen in their life. Just saying. I'm not about revenge. I'm about moving on. And I moved out here to West Hollywood in order to do that. I was supposed to move out here 2 years ago, and then the kafufu and all that. So we don't talk about any of this medical deep blue stuff. Okay, I can quite extensively, but I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in my project, and I'm interested in Mark Fisher. So in my story, we have the punk rock band over 10 years. But we have Walter for, whatever it is, 25 years. And then maybe, I always do this because I look weird on the camera, everything's backwards. And then maybe a Gordon Parks type director might come in and start working in 1970s Black exploitation films. The films that I wrote for Walter, and I have the treatments for all of these films. They're not exploitation. They run the gamut. So I appreciate all of my watchers, and I appreciate you guys getting involved in my channel. Okay. But what we're going to talk about today is Mark Fisher. Mark Fisher is the template for this professor. Mark Fisher, I believe, is one of these social media murders. They're not suicide. I can't figure out how Mark Fisher committed suicide. Okay. But we have Chris Cornell, suicide by hanging. Chester Bennington, suicide by hanging. Kate Spade, suicide by hanging, and Anthony Bourdain, suicide by hanging. They all had social media accounts. I had the same social media account in 2017. And that's what was happening to me. The same thing was happening to me. I was despondent. And they coincided it with my divorce. And they were cranking the algos on this device right here. This is weaponized. Not one single channel on YouTube is about this being weaponized. Not one. And I doubt anything is on Rockfin or whatever, man. I mean, I'm not putting down the other sites because I really liked the guy. I can't remember his name. He had a podcast called Tragedy and Hope. I think he did one. I think Rockfin is his or something like that. Okay, so I do appreciate the alternative and the fringe. Okay, so I'm fairly well versed. I'm fairly well rounded as far as information goes. I study both the left and the right side. And Mark Fisher is one of these professors who was wrapped up into communism. He read all this Marxist theory, Deleuze, and all these people. I'm sorry just to say it. It wasn't Bertrand Russell. Who was it? Oh, Foucault. All this Deleuze and Guattara. I can't remember his name. Okay, and he was reading all of this stuff, and he was wrestling with the notions, and he started writing in around the time that I was writing the songs for Linoleum Blownapart. Mark Fisher starts getting involved in this kind of hacking collective. He has a name called K-Punk, and they're still believing in this William Gibson style future where you're going to be jacked in, and then this future never arrives. And he's dealing with the notions that you go to the university and all they're teaching you is all these Marxist theories. And he's like, well, capitalism is never going to go away. How are we going to reconcile that? I guess he never stopped to think about, well, we're going to have social capitalism. I mean, that's basically what we have. We have socialism. That's what we have. And we've had it for a long time, obviously. When I was a kid, minimum wage was $2.35 in 1978. Okay, and that's what I was making. And then 20 years later, when I left New York in around 1998, I go to Las Vegas and I'm making $5 an hour. Do you really think the price of goods and services matches $5 an hour in 1998? You see what I'm saying? And then they have something called shrinkflation, where you're getting every other Toblerone, a pyramid taken out. A smaller size toothpaste is the same price as when it used to be this big, right? When I had a drink with a friend of mine, I went and just bought some what do you call them? The plane, what you get on the plane, the hotel. And I swear to you, they're not even filled to the top. They're like an inch from the top. They're into the bottom of the bottle. So that's known as shrinkflation. They're actually, and I tried to explain to you guys, there's this Malthusianism. That's what it's called. And they're creating an artificial scarcity. Okay. This is just a fact. And then in the schools, we all know, it's like, did you go to college? Yeah, I went to college. What degree did you get? It's like a Bachelor in Fine Arts. Yeah, so did I. And you're both working at, we used to call them dime stores, at a drugstore. What do they call them? CVS, and we just call them pharmacies now or something? I don't know. Right? You're working at the pharmacy. You're working as a barista. I'm not putting any jobs down. I was a day laborer. Like I said, I'm making $5 an hour. I left New York and I was making $175 a day. I got work as I was seconding in the camera department, seconding in the, I was a second assistant director. Okay. So, right. The way I looked and the way I dressed, I showed up on a job site one time and they thought I was a rep for the union. Chick looked at me, she goes, "Oh God, union rep is here." And I'm like, "Union rep? I'm just a PA." And she's like, "Oh shit, I thought you were fucking," right? So I was older and I needed, I don't want to get, got to stay on track here. Okay. So we're talking about Mark Fisher, and he is the template for a self-harmy professor in my story that's called Linoleum Blown Apart. And what part of Linoleum Blown Apart are we in? We are in the 1959. Okay, so Mark Fisher is doing this in like 2009. He's talking, he's writing articles, he's putting out books. He put out a book and it just became a big seller. It just, right? It caught the zeitgeist. And I'm reading quotes from him and he's talking about Kurt Cobain. Okay, so a lot of things are lining up here. And Mark Fisher committed suicide as well. And right here. He would never suspect it, and I never suspected it. I knew when I was being attacked through an algorithm that I knew it was coming from my device, but like I said, I didn't know where or how. Right, and I found myself like just scrolling Craigslist, like sexual hookup ads and stuff like that. Like it became this addiction and obsession. It was unnatural. It was inauthentic behavior. Like if you're gonna spank the monkey, then you spank the monkey and you look at some porno, you spank the monkey, take a nap, right, and then right. But this was hours and hours, and I wasn't getting any sleep, and it disrupts your sleep. That's what it does. And so I was 100% being targeted. My wife knows about this, and my drummer knows about this. You can get involved in my show if you care to. You can do a FOIA request on my name, and we'll see what comes up. It costs $25. I don't have it. Okay, that's what I was going to do for my book. I was going to do a second memoir called I, Son. But I decided after spending a few months in premier office spaces on Wilshire, I started formulating Linoleum Blown Apart, this novel. Okay, and it's actually done. I have the whole thing outlined. All I have to do is just sit down and write it. And I don't think a lot of people understand this process. Okay, and that's all you really have to do. I have to just sit down and physically write it out. It's no problem. Part of it is behind a paywall on Kindle. Okay, so right? I don't know why I did that. Yeah, I'm using this. I told you guys they got these biting flies here. I'm using this like a horse's tail. Like I'm just kind of like sitting there going like this. Ugh, ankle biters. I love watching the dogs here. They got a dog park. And sometimes I sit there while I'm doing my studies, but you got to understand something as an actor and as a writer, I perform this stuff out. And it looks kind of weird. I should just get a yoga mat and like pretend like I'm doing Tai Chi. Excuse me. Burp alert, burp alert, burp alert. So you can see how musical I am. I have no musical training. My oldest sister is a mezzo soprano, and she does operettas and stuff like that. Okay. If my family had the nurturing that it deserved, my sister was a prodigy on the fiddle. She just picked it up and started playing. But once my dad was taken out of our family by a homewrecker, that was it. And now my mom was left scrambling with 4 kids, and we didn't know much what to do. And I was afraid because I got hit by a car at the age of 5. So I had some severe phobias, plus the neighbors were behaving bizarrely. And look at what's happening to me now with people LARPing me. They're still doing it. It's these ancient fears come back. Okay. And Mark Fisher talked about hauntology. That's what he talked about. Okay. And he was talking about things that kind of come back. It's like one of his last books, he was deconstructing all these haunting narratives, right? It's kind of interesting. You got to look into Mark Fisher. Again, if I could do this dissertation, I would be doing it. I just don't know how to do all this stuff. Okay. So, what we're going to talk about today. Oh, here it is. Okay. It's called The Weird and Eerie Quotes of Mark Fisher. So, he wrote a book called, Weird and Eerie. Right. So, that's right. That was his last book. And then he self harmed. And I believe it was because of his device. I believe so. I know it for a fact because that's what happened to me. So, since I have a new lease on life, the way I did in Las Vegas after I overdosed, and luckily Narcan was used and brought me back to life, I don't have any struggles with drugs or alcohol anymore. Struggling with it is like craving it, like a cigarette. Cigarettes were the heaviest, man. Cigarettes were heavy, right? And they were tough to give up. But once you give them up, and you know, like I said, I like sitting down having a beer or something, doing a bong rip and drinking beer. And what my wife was doing was she was popping pills. And what does Mark Fisher talk about? He talks about SSRIs, and he talks about why is it in a capitalist system that we have all these mental health problems, right? And he's trying to figure out, well, why is there a dip in serotonin? And he's trying to like figure all this stuff out. But I think by that time, he doesn't realize that it's really coming kind of from this, because you're getting all these huge rushes in dopamine and serotonin, and like I said, it works the same way, even if you're scrolling porn, no matter what you're scrolling, it works the same way, right? You're looking for something new. Like, what is this? So if you know somebody who has 2 accounts on Facebook, that's how they were coming at me, beware. One of those accounts is weaponized. And my wife used it on me for years, and she cranked it up to 11. The last time they used it here, they used it on about 4 occasions. The last time it was put on mild. The guy put it on mild. Excuse me. Burp alert. Sorry. See, one of the things I want to talk about as far as being homeless is concerned, you have to eat what you get. So I just had this whole thing. I'm grateful to get these cookies. Someone who I helped him out, left some food for me. I'm really grateful, but you got to eat what comes to you. So here I am. I found some chicken salad yesterday, so I'm eating found food, and then what are you eating? You're eating whatever you can get, and that's what causes obesity. And so you might have these really poor people who are obese. Why? Because you eat whatever you can get. That's why. So, right? And so it's interesting because this goes into what Mark Fisher was struggling with. He's like, how are they going to bring back Marxism? How are they going to do it? Right? Because he's reading all this Marxist garbage that they teach in college. Okay? And there is a complete blowback to that. And that's what created a lot of this alt-right movement, was people in colleges were just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. There's other books out there. There's other ways of thinking than this Marxist way of thinking. And I believe Mark Fisher was struggling with it as well. You see, I'm trying to learn. Right? I know it's easy for you guys, okay? It's not so easy for me. Okay? So, right, so he's struggling with all this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to incorporate this into my story. And Walter's life, I love Walter's life because I created everything about every single one of his films. And you're going to see his life before the film comes out, and then you're going to see the film. You're not going to see him actually shooting the film. I think that's jejune, boring, and usual to the type. I just do. Okay? So I have 30 songs. I have over 30 songs ready to go. And there's songs that's I don't even have recordings of. Okay? So like I said, I have a new lease on life, and my new lease is coming out here. And I'm fully confident in this project completely. I know every aspect of this project. And one of these days, I'll be afforded to sit down and be able to work it out without having it just be in my notes. I need a printer, and I have to sit down, I have to write it out, I print it up, I throw things out. Like, I need an office. And that's why I rented at Premier Office Space, because I need an office space. And I was just getting ready to move in to a different office. And, they don't want people to quote unquote live there. I wasn't living there. I was living in my car. That's okay. I don't carry a grudge. I don't have a grudge, but I will be in pursuant to my drummer and my wife for using this tech. I will be in pursuant until the day I die, because I can't be in pursuant of anybody else. And then if my wife drops off, then it'll just be my drummer. I have to be in pursuant of somebody because it's torture, and I didn't do anything to you. And I know that they passed the buck because some POS at some of the art handling companies were using this at Wellpack. It was used at Wellpack. It was used at Atelier 4, and they only used it once at Bonsai Fine Art Transport, but they used the hardcore stuff. They have you barking at the moon. And so if they put somebody by you like a woman, it makes it look like you're yelling at this woman. It's a lie. You're just yelling anyways because you're being attacked. And I believe they attacked Mark Fisher, and I believe they attacked Anthony Bourdain and the other gentleman and lady that I named. I believe they did, and I believe it came from their device, and I'm not going to give up on that. And that has nothing to do with me writing Linoleum Blown Apart. This has nothing to do with me, and I'm not out to get, oh my God, I'm going to get somebody. There's nothing you can do about it. But if these companies, these social media companies, use plausible deniability, well, then I have the face of it. I have my wife. Hey, do you think you could give me, hey, Facebook, can you give me all the information on my ex-wife during a lawsuit? Yeah. We're being sued. Yeah, here's all the records. Here you go. Oh, look, she had 2 accounts. One of them was weaponized. And then we'll go from there. Right? Maybe you don't need to go to a jailhouse and get gang jumped. Since you like running Q-ops on people down in Florida, I was scared to death, man, for years. Okay? So, like I said, I live like a true outlaw because I talked to Yolanda numerous times. I called her on the phone. Are you okay? Yes, I am. I'm very sorry. Okay. Do you want to get back together? No. Okay. Just making sure. I called her month after month for about 6 months. So what I do is my fucking business, right? It has nothing to do with anybody else. That's my business. I don't go around background checking people. I think it's pretty weak. I think it's sad, and I think it's pathetic. But like I said, you're living in a childish era where they're crowning the child. They're crowning this childlike behavior. Look at the people getting rewarded for it. My wife and my drummer. They're completely rewarded for this behavior. They're the quintessence of it. Teasing people, right? So they don't want hate speech in real life. But you can torture people on this, and you can name call on this all day long. Sorry, can't catch them. It was you've been hacked. Burp alert. They called me Zoolander for so long that they were convinced that I was the biggest moron. Let me tell you something. Zoolander never did a play. Okay? Just because you got a sissy bitch crush on me, that's your business, not mine. So, I am the real thing, not Coke or Coca-Cola. Drugs don't define me. My record doesn't define me. I define me. And I take people on an individual level, and I'll never get close to a person again. My wife had no business doing that. She used it nonstop, over and over and over again. If you're going to use that weapon, like these people did here, they used it once and that's it. You never see them again. If you're going to use that weapon, you better use it once. You didn't do that. Right? Like I said, when you hear your name called, you might be part of a lawsuit. You might be part of a tort claim, and you won't be able to make a move. So there's that. So this Mark Fisher, I'm really excited about this. Believe it or not. Let me play a little song to break it up a little bit. Let me play another song. I wrote all of these songs, and I'm trying to play something that wasn't really part of. So we're just gonna play this one. I should be able to click on it twice. I'm such a. Okay, so these are just basic punk rock songs. Okay, that one's going to be called Brew Hawaii because it's going to be like six pack, like Black Flag six pack. But you can hear the music. I actually based part of the song on Paul Revere and the Raiders SS 396. Okay, I had this 45 when I was a kid. My mom had all these scratchy 45s, and I was the youngest, so my sisters had 45s in there. Like there was the Rolling Stones, Angie. I remember when my sister brought that single home. I think singles were 49 cents to 99 cents. So, we had this little bit of spending cash because, like my wife calling me a butler. So I had to clean houses in my neighborhood. Okay, so I don't think anyone of her parents or my drummer's parents were attacked because of the tone of their skin, but people in my family were, including myself. Okay, so we're talking physically attacked. So again, I try to not do too much cognitive therapy on the show, but it is part of this cognitive therapy. And this is how I came up. And I loved all this music because there was all this stuff going on out here. And it was basically my mom going like this. And I didn't want to hear it. It didn't make any sense to me. And I saw this beautiful moment in this new film with Mel Gibson, and his son gets out of the Who's Gal and he comes home and he just goes, Dad, I need this place out here. The cabin in the woods, I need to use it. And he's like, okay. No questions asked. And when the cops show up, he goes, as far as I know, he was here. Do you see that? Now, that's something in my family that I never had. I never had anybody having my fucking back. I had a bunch of women turning on me. It's pretty nasty business. And I don't want to say a bunch because really, unfortunately, I was closest to my youngest sister, no longer. I'm more closer to the middle sister. She has a son. Okay, so she kind of understands this male dynamic, and it really truly is. It doesn't matter if you're gay or straight, you're going to have this masculine or feminine energy. Okay, and when you're in a relationship, that energy is symbiotic and it's going to vacillate and it's going to pulse, right? At certain points, your partner's going to be more dominant than you. And this is going to happen over the years. And like I said, when I was at the community house just recently, people were applauding the fact that two people were together. They love it because we're all searching, right? That's why the scribe said that they took the female out of the male, right? But it's really atom, like the atom, the single atom. They used to call them atomic, right? Right? Everything's broken down atomistically. So that's what that word means. Atom means one. And then Eve means to weave. So they're looking to come together. And when it comes to, um, basically, like I said, when you look at the first passages in the Bible and they eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they realize they run and they put their clothes on because they feel ashamed. Well, what happens when after you have sex? You're like, okay, I'm done. I'm gonna go put my clothes on now. You don't really want to have sex anymore, do you? So we have this impulse. It's called the libido. And we also have this other impulse. It's called the death drive. Okay. And so with this death drive as well, that causes people to. Oh, and by the way, Mark Fisher was talking about chemical imbalance, and I was just talking about this chemical imbalance. It first appeared in THX 1138. That's where you first heard about a chemical imbalance, and you need to get medicated. Okay. Now, I'm not saying there's a there. And again, this is the counter conspiracy program, Coco Pro, dude, bro, where, okay, these conspiracies exist, but that's not what I'm making my show about, right? If you're going to sit here and say that Putin downed somebody's plane, and you're like, oh, yeah, he quite possibly could do that, then you have to also concede that if E. Howard Hunt is blackmailing the president of the United States for $5 million, then maybe they took his wife's plane down. You have to concede this fact. That's all I'm saying, right? I hope you enjoy my show. I hope you appreciate it and share my show, okay? But what we're talking about is my project, and we're using Mark Fisher as the template. And my head going, right? One of these days I'll get a studio, right? But I have to act these things out, and that's what I do. And so Mark Fisher is self-harming, but he's completely overloaded. And he's trying to make sense of all this, right? And so is the professor in The Sunset Limited. He's just overwhelmed. You get overwhelmed with all this information, right? And that's why you reach a certain age, like I did a long time ago, where I'm not going to accept another person's interpretation of this reality. And also, Mark Fisher's talking about the simulation. So this was coming into his reading, the simulation and simulacrum, simulation, this kind of, right? So, right. So, that's the template for this professor. And this professor, he writes a book called Scorpius XL. So I wanted to kind of base it on this Gödel, Escher, and Bach guy. Okay. I was going to base it on the Gödel, Escher, and Bach writer. I don't know his name. I'm not going to memorize it. You can see I'm doing this off the top of my head. I do make mistakes, but thanks for sticking with me. This stuff seems to be working a little bit better. Got to take it day by day. Smart water. Oh. Okay. So he writes a book, and I think he's the author. I'm talking about this fictional professor. I think we're going to have him be the author of a book that's similar to Gödel, Escher, and Bach, where people are just like blown away by it. And that's what gets him his tenure, right? That's what gets him his tenure at the school. But he also wrote Scorpius XL, right? So I'm trying to think of somebody who did something similar where it's just like, they tried writing fiction, but then they kind of moved into these philosophical books, right? Instead, they're just like, I tried to put my hand at fiction. So that's what this guy does, right? And so I want this to kind of take place a long time ago. So probably in the 1930s to 1940s, he was doing this. And so he put out this book just the same way that Alfred Bester did as well, right? Alfred Bester wrote The Demolished Man and, The Stars My Destiny. Okay. And a lot of people were influenced by that. Anyways, you got to look into it yourself. Sorry. They did an episode of Babylon 5 with regard, and they made a character by the same name as Bester, Alfred Bester. And he was one of the first people to talk about, the corporatocracy, the coming corporatocracy, where you're really working for these corporations. You're not working for any kind of government, right? So you have the PPP, public-private partnership, and the same thing went into Alien, right? These alien scripts where they're out there in space working on behalf of a corporation. And so Alfred Bester was the first one to do this. And he had his two books, The Stars My Destination and The Demolished, I guess it was called The Demolished Man. And, sounds very similar to The Demolition Man. Burp alert. Yeah. Oh boy. I down those cookies, man. You gotta I just eat when I can. So anyway, right? So I'm talking about this character. So again, Walter comes to the Hollywood system. He saves the system. He does a Grabowski film, Pork Chops and the Who's Gal. All of a sudden, Jeremy Cloud comes in, who's an Alan Watts type character, like Carlos Castaneda and Gordon Wasson, who went out and tried entheogens and smokes weed. And he's from the Atlantic Power elite families. That's where he's from. Like the guy making LSD, you guys know this Orange Sunshine story? He's from Carnegie Mellon. He's from the Mellon family. Okay? The guy making LSD is from the Mellon family. Okay? And we know Timothy Leary has ties to the CIA. And again, when I talk about the CIA and I talk about the deep state, I'm not putting it in the pejorative. They simply exist, right? And they have their motivations for doing whatever it is they do. They have their own operations. And I was explaining to you before that local police departments are respondent to local guys like me when the fact is, where's this dope coming from? It's coming from, right? Now, don't forget, Poppy Bush came in the White House and they tried taking out John Lennon and they tried taking out Ronald Reagan. Take a look at Mark David Chapman and David Hinckley. Is that his name? John Hinckley? John Hinckley and Mark David Chapman. Okay, look at these two men. They're identical. The shooting took place, both shootings within 4 months of each other. And Poppy Bush comes into the White House and he's CIA. It is an operation. I'm not saying that he knew about it. All I'm saying is that it happened under his guise. And so what these guys use is plausible deniability. They're just like, well, I didn't know anything about it. But people know that when somebody gets into office, that it's okay, we can go with this project, right? It's like if you ever listen to these tapes of E. Howard Hunt, who's the basis of both Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise, and in this new Plumbers film with Woody Harrelson. Listen to those tapes, and he just tells you, he calls it the big event, the murder of JFK. And he just talks around the issue because he is a cog in the wheel. They know they have to be a cog in the wheel. And he already lost his wife. She was already dead. So he still had a son. He doesn't want his son to get quote unquote whacked. I remember I don't know what to say. The guy said waxed before instead of whack. I'm like, I might be able to do that too. Right. So I talk about this kind of stuff because it's interesting. It breaks up just one little narrative that I come on here talking about all the time. You gotta break it up. I feel this way about what I do, about my show. You guys gotta grow my show. Please share my show. Please. I appreciate it. I'm trying to find a place to work. I need to find a day job as well as being able to sit down and write my novel. I'm not here to live off of anybody. Okay. I'm not here to sponge. I don't sponge. I always bring something to the table. I cook. I'll bring food. I can work. Like I said, I can work. You can make $300 a week and still collect. Right. So this kind of stuff isn't known. It's not known to a lot of people like me. Right. And I really resent the fact that, I've had quote unquote friends, man. They knew that I could be collecting unemployment. They went out of their way not to even tell me. I didn't know men could be this jealous. I had no idea. I didn't know men could be this catty and sissy like. That's what they are. And these guys are, they're all tatted out and just like, hey, dude, bro, I'm going to work. Whatever, dude. I mean, just some of the bitchiest sissies. And I'm talking about my former friends. We're done, man. I could have used so much help and I didn't get any. And it was no pleasure being with my wife. Now, I was collecting my work for Two-Legged Animal and I was able to put that out. But, and again, with the shenanigans that were going on at the time, that's why I don't really care. I'm an old punk rocker. I laughed about Cash for Smells. I'm like, what the fuck? In case you don't know, I had a Cash for Chaos shirt on in Facebook, and they went around rolling with a roller, Cash for Smells. And these people at these art handling companies thought it was funny. They're giggling about it like children. Like I said, it's the crowning of the child. It's the embracing of this childlike behavior. Oh, you're canceled. You're canceled. Well, I'm trying to create relationships out here. I don't give a fuck about here. Look what happened to Mark Fisher. He was all about this. He was a great thinker. I'm not being reductive, but I'm interested in relationships out here. I'm interested in people who are like, wow, Gordon, we really like your idea. I can't believe you know how to write songs and stuff like that. Okay. This is what people in Detroit get. They get all this smoke blown up their fucking ass. And I explained to you, I was the first. I was the first to actually be on stage and get work as an actor in theater. I didn't give a fuck. I mean, I was into film, but I wanted to do theater. Lee Sobel actually wrote a play with me and a couple other actors in mind. I think his girlfriend in mind. He wanted us in this play, and I was grateful to do it. But you got to understand something. I was an alcoholic since the age of goddamn 12 years old. Who's ever survived this? Hemingway couldn't write. You reach a certain age, you can't do anything. And he committed suicide. Why? Trust me, I know. Because you live in this world of alcohol. And like I was talking about that property, A Rainy Day in New York, where Woody Allen is calling the character Gatsby. Sorry, I need to go like this a little bit more. He's calling this character Gatsby. The character is based on Holden Caulfield from A Catcher in the Rye. That's who that character is based on. That is Holden Caulfield almost to a T, right? I mean, just really, right? But like I said before, it's taboo, right? And don't ever forget that there was a Washington Post article, burp alert, about bringing male prostitutes, young male prostitutes, into the White House, right? So whether or not this is just some salacious article, how much truth it has, who knows, right? I don't want to put too much into these media deep blue stories, and I don't want to put too much into the counter conspiracy program, Coco Pro. Instead of COINTELPRO, mine's called Coco Pro. Coco Pro Dude Bro. Again, who cares? I mean, people are kind of piecing this stuff together now, but we were talking about it, we meaning those who were talking about it, 10 years ago. Okay? Like I said, the stuff in my book was written 20 years ago. 20-year-old stories are in my book. Okay? And I gave it away for free for years. Just to be nice to people and to be friendly. Go fuck yourself. Man, to have that happen is unconscionable, man. And it was all through the Facebook app. Make no mistake about it. And Facebook is going to use plausible deniability. And then I can get the individuals who are involved. And I remember them. And many police use this. They use this weapon. Okay? Be careful. When you see a cop pulling his phone out, he's not just pulling his phone out. He's going to zap you, and you're going to hit the ground. Okay? And I explained to you, I write fiction now, and I'm kind of working on this story where all these police officers all of a sudden find themselves out of work. And they're walking around, and all these people who they've been putting in jail are walking right next to them. Hey, man, what's up? And these guys, now the reason they can't just turn tail and run is because they bought houses and they would have to sell their house. You're not going to give up all the money that you sunk in. You've been paying on your house. You've been paying your mortgage, or you're just going to give up your condo and run. You can't. So they're almost trapped in their apartments because they can hardly go on in the streets. Because when somebody recognizes them, they're like, "Hey, man, you're one of those cops who who just got let go." And the reason they got let go is the panopticon, not RoboCop, but you got drones and you have the panopticon, right? Right now, I can literally do anything except for grand larceny. I can steal anything under a certain amount. Nothing's going to happen to me. I told you before, I took a vow to my blood father, probably because I would have really hurt the guy. That's how much resentment I felt. And this is part of the reason why these Fed rats in Michigan and New York picked up on, hey, we can get this guy. Look, he grew up with all women. We can get this guy. He's a beta male. And look at everything that it took to try to bring me down. They used tech. They used this fucking Cash for Smells app. They did everything. And now I'm writing the greatest novel that's going to be a television series. Make no mistake about it. Okay? So, Mark Fisher is the template for this professor. Okay? So, Walter works with Jeremy Cloud. Okay? And Jeremy Cloud comes in, works on 2 projects, and then poof, he's gone. Like Terry Southern, okay? And these guys working with Kubrick, okay? So, and then they ask Walter, "What do you want to do? A science fiction film?" Like, yeah. They give him stacks of manuals, old screenplays. He reads because it's 1959, so he can read Alfred Bester, right? He can read him. So he can have that book. the star is my destination. Right? He could be looking at it. I said, this is what's great. I mean, I have all this minutia put um, in this project. There's tons of books in this project. Okay, people with books, people writing books. It's all about books. There's a book about Walter, that character in Lionel's time, the band Linoleum Blownapart time. She's reading that book about Walter. That has to be created. Okay, so at this moment in time, he finally finds Scorpius XL. And so you can have a scene with he meets up with the guys at the studio, and they're like, well, what do you got? He's like, I want one of these three. And one of them could be Alfred Bester, and one of them could be Scorpius XL. Excuse me, burp alert. And, right, I ate a whole tray of cookies. Dollar store cookies. They tasted great, by the way. I'm grateful to have them. Okay. So the studio guys are like, oh. They're like, you know this guy. You know who this guy is? Right? And then quite possibly they say, like, yeah, he wrote this. He's some far out mathematician, but that's his book from like a long time ago. So I have a scene actually written already where the studio. Don't forget, I could go all day about the studio. There's three brothers who run the studio. Okay, and right. So, anyways, I can't remember where I was going with that. But they want to make Scorpius XL, and so they tell him about the author, and they let him know that he is a professor, and they're like, well, if you're going to make one of these, we can, why don't you go talk to this professor at the college? So I was going to tell you about a scene with the studio, but I don't want to get too far off. I tend to do that a lot. So I appreciate if you could share the show, and if you could leave a comment, that'd be great. So we're talking about my novel, Linoleum Blown Apart. We're in Walter's life, and they say, well, go talk to this professor. So he goes and meets him. He's like, Professor. Okay. So I think I'm going to call him Professor Mark. So you see the professor, he's in his classroom. He's covered in chalk, right? And nobody really is paying any attention to him. And they come up to him, they're like, Professor Marks? And he goes, Mark. Professor Mark. Okay. I'm not going to call him Professor Fisher, even though that makes more sense. But Mark Fisher was entranced by Marxism because he was one of these university intellectuals, and that's all they push in those fucking places, with all due respect. It's the same people over and over and over again. And again, that's what caused a bit of an antithesis to that. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. I could look at him. But there's a couple of people that I listen to, and they give an alternative view of people like Toynbee and, some of these thinkers, right? And, what have you, that you're not getting in the university system. I mean, one of the guys I listened to, I'm trying to think of his name now, just got into it with this guy over Ulysses, James Joyce Ulysses, and it's written on a metaphorical. You have the straightforward story, and you have the metaphor that's going with it. And he's like, there's the metaphor there, right? And the teacher's like, what are you talking about? And it's just like, you can't see the metaphor? Like, it's right there, And the teacher couldn't see it. And it's like, whoa. So, oh man, his name is right on the tip of my brain too. Anyway, so he's one of these people who were disaffected, and they started their own thing right here on YouTube. I'm YouTube exclusive, right? I'm all about Google and not the Google, right? Right. So you got to be careful guys. And I don't want this to keep happening to me. I've had it. I don't appreciate it, and I didn't deserve it. You know, what happened between me and my old lady, that's my business, right? She wasn't going to jail. I was. So you want to continue a relationship with me? Did I do the wrong thing? Of course, yeah. You know it as soon as you do it. But I'm not going to allow that to define me as a person. And I'm not going to let some piece of trash skank bring that up in my face. That's my business. And I'm not going to get treated like shit because of it. Okay. Like I said, once I know that you're part of this crew and you're using these means and you're all about this, we're done. There's not going to be any friendship, and there's not going to be anything that has to do with you. That's over. So I want to make sure that's stated for the record. People like my wife and my drummer, I'll see you in hell or I'll see you in court. There is no friendship, man. There is no coming back from this. You're using a neurological weapon on me, you're going to wish you never did. And I literally have a book called Two-Legged Animal. And by the way, Mark Fisher was talking about this. He's talking about this because they keep telling you in academia that you're an animal. And he has had it with that. Okay? He talks about Kurt Cobain. Okay? I wish I could find it. He's talking about Foucault, Deleuze, Guattari. I mean, this is all that stuff that they push in academia. And he talks about SSRIs. He talks about mental illness. Okay? And he can't see at that point anything about socialism. And if you think that there's going to be a universal basic income, let me tell you something. It would be easier to commit genocide. And I believe that might be what people are kind of weighing out in their minds. Maybe I should have had my glasses on. Because it is a blur for me. And I do it for you, my audience, because I don't want you looking at reflections. Okay. So is it easier to commit genocide than it is to give us a universal basic income? Oh, guys, big news. Burp alert. Oh, boy. I got to eat what? I don't have any money for food over this weekend. Okay? I have nothing. So my money doesn't come in until the 9th. That's it. So I have to eat found food. It's just the way it is. But people are really nice. So don't get it twisted. They're very, very nice. But the financial collapse is going to be 2025. Okay? The financial collapse is going to be 2025. It's not 2027. I made a mistake. That's why on there I put, like, if through accelerationism, they're going to do it 2025, 2026. I think it's supposed to be 2026, but it's going to be 2025. Okay? This is when the financial collapse is going to happen. Okay? So Mark Fisher was talking about this being animals. He is convinced that we are nothing but animals, and this is maddening. And it's so interesting that I am pushing against that. I'm kicking against these pricks. I've had it with people defining things for me when you're supposed to use your own deliberation and resolve. Deliberation, resolve. Deliberation, resolve. Right here. I was part of the online debate. You know, people were debating all kinds of things, you know, ontology, eschatology, you know, just, you know, where we come from, you know, right? Don't forget that the half-life of carbon is 5,000 years, and you have to go by the half-life because they're not doing any tests in a vacuum. There are no vacuums. Maybe right? They make it look like there's all these scientific labs everywhere, but are they going to have a really life-size, quote unquote, vacuum with no air pressure, with no air getting in there at all? Right? So when they have that kind of stuff, that's reserved for like NASA and Tesla. Okay, those guys have that stuff. So it's not very many places where you can do experiments in a vacuum. So that's what I'm here to tell you. So it might seem like there's all this great stuff going on, but Mark Fisher was haunted. Mark Fisher was anticipating William Gibson's being jacked in, Johnny Mnemonic. He's anticipating the Jetsons, and it's never coming. Well, guess what? I told you. It crept up. Ooh, crept up on us. Here it is, right here. This is a neurological weapon. And when Elon Musk puts in the Dojo chip, when you go on to Twitter and Facebook, you're going to be so much more satiated. Look at how much we're satiated now. People are on that thing, and it's like they look up at the clock and 8 hours has gone by. Okay? We're satiated by it now. You are really going to be satiated by it. Okay? That's why I'm coming here. All my energy are going into this property. So when Walter shows up with the book, Professor Mark, is it Marx? Because they're going to be calling him Marx, like Karl Marx. No, it's just Mark. Okay. Well, this is all, everything that's in my book is subject to change. So, because it's not written yet. I do have something underneath the paywall on Kindle. If you guys want to check it out. Okay. The only thing that somebody bought was The Big Kiss Off, which was an answer to living with my wife for 7 years. And I explained to you guys yesterday in the other show that we should have hooked up in the 90s. I tried hooking up with this person. Okay. Again, and here I am. I'm dating a coke whore and I'm dating my wife. And I'll stick by what I say. It takes one to know one. Right. And I'm dating, other women at the time. Right. So, when my wife asked me to move in and help her, yeah, man, guys like that. We like that stuff. And come to find out she was using this weapon. Well, maybe you'll go to jail and get gang jumped. Maybe. I don't know. See how it feels. See how I feel. I've been gang jumped, I told you, numerous times. I've been to jail, so I'm sorry, what now? And don't ever forget, I can also background check Yolanda. So don't you ever forget that. I know the people who are involved in this. Okay? And I don't care about that. I want to move on with my life. Right? And right now, we're using Mark Fisher as the template for a character who Walter meets in 1959. So obviously, he's not going to be talking about, tech and social media. He wrote Scorpius XL, and Scorpius XL is about excelling into space. Now, because it comes out in 1959, 1963, there's going to be an element to it that is like the Twilight Zone. It's an easy narrative. Burp alert. Please forgive me. Not for burping, but for having this easy element. Okay, you know how to serve man as a cookbook? It's like that. It's very simple. Okay, because this comes out again, 59 to 63. Okay, and there is an aspect inside of it about a public-private partnership corporation that took over this space flight. And you have the 4 astronauts going to space, right? And you have the 1 astronaut being replaced right at the last minute. And he has to struggle with this. He's like, what? How can we study? How is the sun ever going to die when God created the sun? So that's why they're going to Antares, because there's radiation coming off of Antares. Okay? And they're going to study that radiation and come back. Okay, so there's no we're not, you're not, it's more like Tarkovsky. You're not going to be doing these video conferences because they're out there. Okay. And there's a way that they're going to get out there. I have it all worked out. Right. And this is in his book, and there's 4 of them. Now, don't forget, there's going to be a chemical imbalance as well. When this kid gets picked to go on the flight, he has to go at the last minute. He's replacing a Gus Grissom alpha male. A lot of these astronauts, and I studied NASA for years, okay? I started studying it when I was trying to write We Are Martian. I told you about that property as well. Just basically human beings turning into the grays, turning into Martians from eating paste and having both of their sides of their brain coming together, and then also having the elongated skulls, because in the womb they're in that liquid in the womb, and because of the difference in gravity, when they pull the child out, the skull is going to begin to elongate. And again, whatever. So that's the narrative. And so I was studying about NASA right around that time. So we're talking 2013. Okay. So, and I know that these guys were womanizers and they were alcoholics. I can't say anything about Gus Grissom because he died. That's the whole point. Gus Grissom died. Okay. It delayed everything. Right. And so they were replaced. He was replaced, or, I think maybe, I don't know, whoever. I'm not trying to disrespectful, but come on, guys, work with me. Right. So this is what happens in my story as well. So when he gets replaced on the night that they're going up, and it's like, you're committed, dude, you can't. And so he has this existential crisis. They're going to study the sun to find out, and then they're going to bring this information back. While they're going out there, they're going to stop off at a space station that's being built. Okay. And this space station that's being built is the tetrahedron. So the tetrahedron is a 4-sided, I should have had this pulled up for you guys. You have the tetrahedron. So the tetrahedron into a globe. So let's see what images we have here. So, you have, I guess this is a pretty good one here. I don't know. It's giving me a literal globe. Well, when you put all of these you piece them all together, right? You piece them all together. Whatever. That's not it. Sorry. Right. When you piece them all together, you're not necessarily going to have a globe, but you're going to have this, right? You see? So you just keep putting tetrahedron on tetrahedron on tetrahedron on tetrahedron, and it just keeps growing, just like this, right? So here's a pretty good one. Like, right? You have like that, right? It could take any shape. Do you see how you can fit that one in the middle there? You see that? Pop it in there, and then right, you go from there. So that's the idea. And I found out later, because I had to come up with a shape. I found out later that Stanley Kubrick was going to use it, and they went with the stele. They went with orthogonality. Okay, so there's that. So that's what they're doing, and there's something called the mechatech. Right, it's a mechanical technician, and these mechatechs are basically Terminators, right, with the skin peeled off. So it's the same idea as the Terminator. So, but again, I'm not getting it from the Terminator, okay, or Harlan Ellison, right? Don't forget, Harlan Ellison wrote the Terminator, and they just kind of took it, and they're like, well, let's make a story out of it. And then you got someone great like James Cameron coming in and he's like, Why don't you just say, tell him I'll be back? And you got Arnold going, oh, I don't know. And then before you know it, you got a happy accident. And that's one of the most iconic lines in history. Instead of I'll be right back, just don't say I'll be right back. Just say I'll be back, And he said it, and that was it. It went down in history. So again, I don't talk about the Mandela effect here. I created my own Cinderfella effect because I was being Cinderfella affected. That's targeted, using this device with a bunch of creeps hacking in and pretending to be gang members. And I don't appreciate it. And I never will. So, and again, it's horrific. It's horrific what happened to me down in Florida. It was the worst time in my life. And I got some trash skank who grew up in the same neighborhood as some ex-girlfriend of mine calling me on the phone, laughing about it. Yeah, we're going to see about you too. And don't forget, I'll be background checking all these people. I can put their picture up right here, talk about them all day long. Yeah. Double dog dare me. Going around calling people dogs. Yeah, double dog dare me, motherfucker. Absolutely. I'm not worried about any of these people. Like I said, they don't have any talent. So you had to come at me using tech. They wanted me dead. My wife wanted me dead, and other people wanted me dead. And these people are connected to Disconnected Records who put a dead guy on their cover of one of their records. I'm not impressed. That's my real life, guys. Okay? That's why all this emotional stuff I put into my writing. I put into my songs. You want to soothe the savage beast? Let's listen to another one of my songs. I'll try to pick a good one. Some of this stuff is, it's tough. I don't like this version of. So let's just play Back When again. I want you guys to hear this hook. I want you to really give a listen to this. Don't want to be in tonight. Why you think you're so bright? Cause it's not 1969. Okay, I put that in there because of Iggy Pop's 1969. I wouldn't want it to be. I don't want to do anything because I don't want to be social scene. I'm talking about a social scene in the 1990s. Now we have what? Social media. I don't want to be a part of your social scene. One ticket to hell. One ticket to hell. One ticket to hell. That's what I gotta say. What sees real? Want to do anything, cause never done me shit. Tell me. Cause I'm all by myself. Keep on wicked, not trying to jump, cause I don't wanna be like God said. Once back again, once first beyond. Want to get again, next thing we're gone. Do it. All right, back when. Okay, so you can hear this poppy song there, guys. That's really the song. That's the standout song. It's got the best riff, right? Burning in the Night. I got a couple other ones. Consequence. These songs I wrote in the 90s. And that's why the band only goes to 96. Okay. I have over 30 songs for this property. And I don't really like any of the early songs by the grievance committee. We were just kind of getting our footing together. I wrote one called Ludovico Technique, in case it's your first time here, about Stanley Kubrick, obviously Clockwork Orange. Okay. So you can hear these songs have hooks. And let me tell you something. When you have a show like this, they used the Chesterfield Kings on The Sopranos. They played there. Drea D'Amato started in OnlyFans. She's 50 years old. Beautiful. I love women my age. I love women in their 50s. Beautiful women. Beautiful. I mean, Roy Stanas, right? And I talked before about all of us wanting to be in a relationship. We all do. It doesn't matter what your proclivity is, right? But, right? And Walter's relationship is with Eva. Now, I haven't even gotten into his next project, which is going to be a clear dust jacket. Are we at 2 hours? I think we're at 2 hours, right? 120 minutes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I got to go at 3:00. So we're just going to talk. All hail Mark Fisher. Mark Fisher is the template for this professor that's going into my project. He writes the book, Scorpius XL. And Scorpius XL, they go to the study Antares, burp alert, and they're going to come back with the information. Okay. And while they're out there, they're going to put together the space station. It's the first two pieces of the tetrahedron. Now, each astronaut is picked for a specific reason. Okay. Now, in these books written by Alfred Bester, The Stars My Destination, and The Demolition Man, whatever it's called. The Demolition, whatever. Yeah, The Demolished Man. It's called The Demolished Man. Okay, they're talking about corporations. That was in the 1950s, guys, okay? And they're talking about corporations taking over. Okay? So in this, it's going to be the same thing. And what they're going to be doing is they put stuff in their food. And so when these astronauts go to eat their food, they're only allowed to eat their own food. Do you see what I'm saying? So all their food is clearly marked, right? And so because it's a tetrahedron, there's 4 sides. So once they go into the space station, then they are, they each have their own side. You get it now? So they're going into their own side, and they really won't have, much to do with each other once they get to the space station, because they have their own experiments to work on. Now, these experiments, they're just going to be talked about. You're not really going to see, please take a look at Tarkovsky's Solaris and look at the production, just the production of it. And you can see what his budget is, right? You can see it's at like a Star Trek. No offense, the original Star Trek. It's probably cheaper than that budget. Okay, and it's no offense, but you can do a lot and get away with it. Like I said, when you're doing these cutaways to the Eiffel Tower, and then you next thing you're in a room, it means you're in a room in Paris. We all know that. So you could do a lot, right? With a little. We all know that. And as good filmmakers, that's what they do. So, again, we're going to be falling into the film of Scorpius XL. And we're just going to follow Walter's life while he's picking this book to make into a film. And you're going to watch the actual film. Each one of Walter's films is a 90-minute film, approximately. And I want to get 7 different directors to direct each one of these films for the series. And then once the films are shot, simultaneous to the films getting shot would be the band rehearsing the songs. And like I said, I have 30 of them. There's a lot of songs, guys. And if you want to go with actors over musicians, because it's going to be kind of hard to get somebody who can play all this and then be actors as well, that's fine too. right? Because we can call in like they did the film Backbeat, and they called in all these grunge guys to do the recordings of the songs and then made it look like the Beatles were playing them, right? So we could do the same thing here. Back when, 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 back when. So during the, I wrote all the songs, so I'm really into them. I love them, and I'll die with them. Yeah, write Disconnected Records. I'll fucking die with them. Fucking trash. So that's the record company that tried to steal it. They've been running game on me. Just like these are all white guys who think they're so different than African Americans. They both run game. They both do the same thing. Fucking losers. Anyone who thinks they run with a set, man, they're the biggest pieces of shit you ever want to fucking see in your life. Give me a break. If you're your own man, then you can handle your own business. And I'm not so sure why people are involved in my fucking business. That's called a sissy crush. That's your problem. You know, that's like I said, man, I'm from the fucking streets, man. Make no mistake about it. 1970s Detroit, yeah, it wasn't nothing nice. I saw some shit. Fuck you. Anyone who from my neighborhood saw some shit. That's why I don't have any respect for these guys, man. Ooh, I just smartened up. I get morose. Okay, I'll just do. I'm trying to be a good guy. I am a good guy. Just ask my mom. Boy. So, right? These guys go into space. There's not that much to it. Okay, they go into space. They reach the tetrahedron, and the mechatechs are building the second one to go and to connect them. Okay, but they all have their own restrictive diets. Okay, and the kid who they go and grab, that's such a lovely scene. I love this scene. I love it. He sneaks a girl into his room. You know, he's 25. He's not a kid, but you understand? He sneaks a girl. He's in the Air Force. He had snuck a girl into his room in his parents' house, and they made love, and they're sleeping. It's like 3 a.m. I can picture this. You know what I picture it like? I picture it like Oliver Stone in Born on the 4th of July. Just a touchingly beautiful story, right? Based on a true story, based on a book. And when Tom Cruise's character and the girl, I think they have one last night together, and then he can never come back because he's already fucking crippled, right? So they have that one beautiful night together, right? You see? And so the same thing happens with this astronaut. But what happens? And it's just crazy that MPs show up. Then the mom looks over and she sees a girl in the room and she's like kind of embarrassed, and the girl's embarrassed. You have this beautiful scene, and the MPs are standing there. They kind of laugh about it because they know he got laid. You know how guys are. They're like, you got to go. Say your goodbyes. So he goes around the room. He says his goodbyes. And his mother gives him a product. It's his favorite treat. It'll either be Nutella or some type of jelly or peanut butter. I was going to make my own Osborne Strange jalapeno peanut butter. I was going to make my own. Okay. So Osborne Strange jalapeno peanut butter. I'd love to have it as in the film. Osborne Strange. I remember eating Quisp, and it had the little green men on it. There were little flying saucers. There was Quisp and there was Quake. Anyway. Okay. So she gives him this Nutella product. and he puts it like they're not going to check him because the MPs are just like get him on the fucking thing. So he's able to smuggle in this contraband, right? The same way that Dr. Smith was a stowaway in Lost in Space. Do you see? So because of this little bit of contraband, and he brings it up there, he's skipping his meals that he's supposed to have. They realize that the meals have been dosed. Okay. And because he can see the other astronauts and how they're behaving. And there are chemicals inside the meals. And each astronaut, there's 4 of them, they have a particular part of the mission. And it gets kind of gruesome. It gets kind of gross. It's pretty crazy story. I have it all worked out, but I can't give everything away, guys. Listen, all hail Mark Fisher. I was reading Mark Land as well. That's who I first came to with accelerationism. And then I discovered Mark Fisher, and I'm glad that I did. This is my creative process. I'm writing a novel. It's called Linoleum Blown Apart. I am homeless in Los Angeles, and I'm going to live here as long as I can. And I want to work, and I want to be productive, and I want to be considered to be a decent part of society because I always was. Thank you very much for watching my show. I appreciate it more than you'll ever know.